Budget 2021, the 75th budget of independent Sri Lanka, the maiden budget of the new government. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapakse, in his capacity as the Finance Minister, delivered his 11th budget today in Parliament, of course calling it a budget that focuses on strengthening the 2021-2023 medium-term program of poverty alleviation and economic revival as envisaged with the vistas of prosperity and splendor of the government of President Gotabaya Rajapakse. And tonight you're joining us in this Hyde Park special discussion where we will feature a panel of experts to discuss and analyze Budget 2021. I thought of introducing to you my speakers tonight. Let me very warmly welcome the chief guest and the key speaker tonight, State Minister of Money and Capital Market and State Enterprise Reforms, Minister Ajith Nivard Cabraal. And of course, we have with us Treasury Secretary Mr. S.R. Attygala joining us, followed by Chairman of Softlogic Group and Chairman of Sri Lankan Airlines, Mr. Ashok Pathirage. We also have Mr. Sujeewa Rajapakse, Chairman of People's Bank and People's Leasing and Finance PLC and Managing Partner of BDO Sri Lanka. Today we're bringing to you this post-budget seminar, an immediate post-budget seminar I would say, as soon as the budget was presented. In association with BDO partners, I'd like to start off with Mr. Sujeewa Rajapakse. Here you've been having these post-budget seminars year after year, and this time you thought of bringing it a little closer to the budget program itself, to have it immediately after the budget reading.
Thanks, Indeewari. Let me first thank Derana, especially my good friend Madhav and the team for giving us, especially BDO and BDO partners, for this opportunity. And it's my great privilege to welcome Minister, my good friend Mr. Cabraal and Mr. Attygala, Treasury Secretary, and Chairman Softlogic, Mr. Pathirage, all these three personnel for this discussion. And every year, as you said, we used to have this discussion, and of course, those are physical meetings, but this time because of this COVID, we thought that first let us have this. And the beauty of this, as you said, just after the budget, we are having this discussion. Thank you very much.
For a greater audience, a bigger audience,
Absolutely.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Mr. Cabraal, I think to start off with you, probably the question may not be to ask you what your take on the budget is, but here people are talking about, we see on Twitter, we see on social media, and we see the opposition also is calling this a boring budget, that nothing new has been introduced. What are you going to tell us?
I think that's the opposition is doing their duty by saying it's a boring budget or not a very good budget. But the real crux of it is, what are we going to do? We are going to have a budget that will need to spur economic growth once again. Since 2014, we have had a consistently dwindling growth pattern in our country. So we need to stimulate the economy. We need to ensure that there is a high growth pattern established in our country once again. And that's a very vital part, because if you're going to talk about poverty alleviation, growth is an essential. But at the same time, with growth comes many other challenges. We need to ensure that our macro fundamentals are also managed carefully. Then we need to have some signature projects. If you remember, during the time of President Mahinda Rajapakse, there was the key project of providing electricity to everyone in the country. There was only 70% electricity being enjoyed by people in our country. So he wanted to make it 100%, and he succeeded in bringing it up to 99%. Now, in the same way, President Gotabaya Rajapakse has also earmarked some key deliverables in his era. One, which is the need to provide potable water to every person in our country. Right now it's only about 42% of the people who are having water. So you would see that there is a fairly big thrust and investment in water projects for the country in the next few years, beginning with 2021. Then the road network, there's another fairly substantial amount that has been earmarked for the 100,000 road network project. Again, a very essential part in the development of our country, making sure that the rural as well as the country infrastructure is developed. Then Another important part is the elephant-human conflict. So these are the priorities that have been identified by the government. But at the same time, what you would see, the Prime Minister emphasized many times that we need to get our macro fundamentals into good shape. We need to ensure that our interest rates are at reasonable levels. We need to ensure that our fiscal deficit is managed in such a way that there will be a fiscal consolidation. We need to at the same time get growth. So you would see it's a balanced budget. It has many facets which are competing interests, but at the same time managed carefully in order to deliver the results. So I think whatever the opposition may say, if we can implement it well, and that's one of the key ingredients of any budget, that is the implementation. We got to make sure that it's implemented well, and then we'll have some very good results. As you know, we have a large number of public sector projects that are going on. We have identified many private sector areas for development. For example, the port city, the Hambantota port related activities. So there are plenty of areas in which we can grasp growth. The pharmaceutical industry. So if we were to activate all these things well, there would be an immense amount of opportunities for growth, and that's what this budget is all about.
Mr. S.R. Attygala, Treasury Secretary, a known public servant, somebody who has been in this, doing this, seen budgets in the making. Would you agree with the Minister it's a balanced budget, is it?
Yeah, I think I have to totally agree with him. Thing is, I think this is an inclusive growth. This budget is all about inclusive growth. It covers the whole spectrum because it's not targeting just one or two groups, affluent parties. No, it covers the whole spectrum, and that's why we are talking about an inclusive growth. So, as Minister mentioned, we started, or at least the new government started, it was a bad wicket in a way, right? The growth rate in 2014 was averaging around 5. It has come down to about 2.3 in 2019. When you say growth, that is economic activity. So economic activity was not happening. So that to generate revenue or anything, we have to push this growth up. So that is the story of this budget in a short. So I have to agree with him what he said.
So that's how I'm not getting anything from you. If I move on to talk to Mr. Ashok Pathirage, the reason why we have you here today is to also give us an industry perspective from Softlogic Group, where you represent a myriad of businesses, successful businesses. But again, are you happy with this budget? What is your take? Have you all been given the due attention as you expected?
Well, I suppose given the situation of the country and the COVID situation and given the finance of the government, I think we can be happy of what is being presented today. And we also can feel that this is a continuation of what they have been, announcing or announced. Some are yet to be implemented during the last, from the day His Excellency took over. So I think, private sector, as you know, right, I mean, we are having many issues with the COVID situation. And as you rightly said, I mean, many sectors, some of the sectors are doing well and some are, really impacted, like the tourism and retail. If you take most of the, shopping malls and everything is closed today. But, there's nothing we can do, right? I mean, we need to wait first. We have to think about the health of the nation and the people and our population. But at the same time, right, we have to understand, and the government has to understand also, that private sector has invested heavily in many of those things. If you take the malls and, those are heavy investments, and we also need to see how we can continue with those. And we understand that tourism is not something that which is going to happen overnight, but once, and we have heard some happy news in terms of the vaccines, and hopefully, right, I mean, tourism can come back, much better than what we have thought, much faster, I would say. So I think the most important thing from our perspective is consistency of policies. Because we find sometimes the new governments comes, I mean, completely new set of policies, and budget to budget the policies are changing. I think as long as that if we can continue these policies, I think the policies are really good. We may have to fine tune. For an example, right, I saw somewhere that government is trying to encourage foreigners to come and invest in apartments. But I would say maybe we must go one step further and offer them residence visas, because I really don't see how practically, just by offering certain concessions, how the foreigners are going to come and invest in apartments. Maybe we must be like Malaysia, where Malaysia had a similar kind of a program and it was very successful. So I think these are some of the things that we may have to fine tune along the way. But I think in general, since you asked me, I think the budget is pretty good. As the Honorable Minister said, you know, we can see very easily the government is trying to stimulate growth. I mean, that is definitely be required. And I heard somewhere that they're expecting GDP of 5.5%. Maybe we can even go beyond that, because we are coming from a lower base with the contraction most probably in this current year.
We talk about policy consistency, but again, from an industry perspective, we hear that yes, we see a continuation of policy, but when we talk about stringent policy, you've sat at post-budget forums year after year. How would you really analyze this, Mr. Rajapakse?
Again, three learned, the people who are talking about the budget, I also would like to agree, because we also expect, as one thing, I wear different hats as a practitioner, and also leading chairman of a bank and a finance company and independent director of a couple of listed companies. We always look forward to have kind of consistent policies in the tax policies, which is absolutely important. And when I look at this budget, also we need to understand about the local and the global scenario within which we are now looking at. Especially IMF has forecasted almost, every country is going to have a contraction. It's very hard. Even if you take our big brother, the neighbor India, is having a major issue about, their economic growth. So even Sri Lanka, we are well aware about the difficulties we are facing. Midst of many challenges, when you look at Honorable Prime Minister has covered almost all the development sectors in this country, looking at least next 5 years growth momentum. We as practitioners, we are extremely happy about the contents of the budget. Of course, there may be, as we go along, I'm sure that, now from tomorrow, the Parliament is going to debate this budget. As of today, I can tell you that we are very happy about especially sectors like, even if you take the banking sector, let us say, now banking sector, there are fairly important areas that have been brought in, which is important to look at. Even SME sector, I believe that most of the budget proposals are based on the President Gotabaya Rajapakse's Saubhagya Dakma. There are 10 key points highlighted that now that document has become the policy document of the country, and I can see there are quite a lot of proposals brought in, which is a welcoming note looking at from practitioners as well as even the corporate sector point of view.
And you're joining us at Hyde Park on a special discussion, a post-budget discussion to analyze Budget 2021. We'll return after this short break. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're joining us at Hyde Park on a post-budget discussion, Roadmap to Prosperity Budget 2021. And of course, I have an eminent panel here to discuss and elaborate on what the budget presents to us. Minister Cabraal, if you talk about the sectors that Budget 2021 focuses on and why we look at these sectors, because as I asked earlier, it doesn't seem like the state sector employees or certain sectors have been given specific attention, but of course, once you read through the budget, there is emphasis on how a more holistic approach is taken to develop the country. But what areas and sectors are you giving priority to?
Actually, any budget, for it to be reasonably good, it must touch the whole country. It must be it must be conscientious about all the segments of the country. Now, if you look at the budget that has been presented, I think all different segments, all different sectors have been addressed. I'll give you an example. Say, for example, the vocational training. We are allocating a certain large sum of money which will provide impetus to the kids who are not going to university to be able to use in order to develop their careers, to develop their skills. Now, see how much that would impact them. They would be prepared for life. They would be prepared to face the challenges of the world. So that's a very important part. Now that we have also we had to make a rational decision to curtail some of the imports, we are saying repair the vehicles that are here, and for that we will provide you with the duty concessions in order to bring the spare parts down, because there are about 12,000 cars and vehicles which are lying in garages without being repaired properly. So there is a strategy for that. So if you see this budget, it has addressed certain new areas that we haven't thought through previously, but which are important for us to address. Now, that's what a budget should really be aiming at, to direct people, direct businesses, direct various segments to be doing certain things that they would not have otherwise done. So you can use tax concessions, you can use other types of benefits to do that. We are also addressing the issue of pharmaceutical industry. So we have allocated the land. Now we are providing certain concessions as well as incentives for them to invest in those areas. A new law is coming for the port city activities. Now that's another very important part for investment to flow into the country. Foreign investment to come in, and local investment also will probably come into those segments, because you need to have investment if you want to have growth. So some part of the growth strategy will come from investment that will come from the government, and another part will come from the private sector. Now both these have to go in tandem. So that's why I think the budget addresses these different segments. It addresses in such a way that they will also be inclined to come in and put their money into those projects. So I think that's going to be a very important part of the overall development. Now, I also think that the priorities have been addressed carefully. Government has articulated that carefully, so that all segments of the people know that other segments also are going to be involved in the growth strategy of the country. So I think we got to see it holistically. To do all that, we need to see that our budget has some numbers for the macroeconomy that will move in the proper direction, and I think Treasury Secretary will probably explain to you. Those are also important to maintain, because unless you have reasonable interest rates, if you do not have your inflation under check, if you do not have a stable rupee, very few people will come in and invest in a country which does not have that. One of the biggest problems that the previous government had in Indeewari was that they neglected those macro fundamentals. They had an unstable rupee, they had high interest rates, they had very few reserves, they borrowed heavily from foreign sources. Now when you do all that, it has an impact on the overall growth strategy of the country. So we are going to keep a close tab on all that stuff as well, and I think by doing that we'll encourage new investment to come in, and then we will be able to achieve the goals that have been set out in the budget 2021.
1.9 trillion rupees of estimated government revenue in 2021, GDP forecast at 5.5%, and 9% of GDP expected budget deficit of 9% of GDP in 2021. But again, when we talk about the first 7 months of 2020, we see that government revenue dropped by 26% and tax revenue is down by 29%. Here we also see the challenges of COVID-19 and then the previous challenges and shocks that the economy faced. Treasury Secretary, how are we looking at financing the budget deficit and looking at this growth rate that we're talking about?
Yeah, first a correction. I think you mentioned revenue 9 trillion. I would be very much happy if 1.9 trillion. 1.9 trillion. But as I mentioned earlier, the economy is in a way functioning under capacity. So there's space there. If that space could be achieved, or if we can push the economy, that means economic activity happening, that will bring revenue. That's how these things work, right? So that's why the whole thrust of this budget to push the economy up, push the economic activities, that will generate revenue. So that's why we have planned 1.9, and that is the 7-month thing. But 10 months, October, up to October 2020, revenue was 1.2 trillion. 1.2 trillion. So the expected 1.5 for this year, that is 1,500 billion, could be achieved. And I don't think 1.9 is in a way unrealistic estimate, right? I think it's a very conservative number. So taking into account the activities that we have spelled out in the budget will push us, at least we will be in a way able to achieve the numbers that we expect here. And also about the financing, you talked about the budget deficit. 9% or little below 9%. But here the important factor is what we are trying to do, all these investments or the activities, the public investment that we are talking about is done, majority to be done by local entrepreneurs. It's locally funded, right? So even the foreign funds that we are anticipating will have a very limited import content. That means money won't go out. Money will be here. Money will be circulated in the country. So that would help. Again, it will help Sujeewa, because a contractor will get the money and go to the bank, right? That's how these things work. But if money goes out, a different story, right? So all the investment, the major investments are domestically sourced, and domestic people will be doing, and domestic preference circulars have been issued. So government is keen on a domestic economy within quotes.
Domestically driven.
Domestically, yeah.
We're talking about industries that were hit during the pandemic, and also with the import restrictions. I'm sure most of your businesses also came under this. But looking at Budget 2021, the simplification of taxes that we're talking about, how do you analyze this going forward for industries? Have we forgotten the SMEs? Have we forgotten the startups? Or is there enough support given here? Mr. Pathirage.
Yeah. So, well, I'm the wrong guy to ask about startups. But
we'll talk about industries, and we'll talk about the companies that are hit.
Yeah. See, I think what we see is, I mean, it's a continuation of existing taxes, right? I mean, good thing is there are no new taxes as such, other than few areas, maybe the gaming, and there's a new GST or something is coming up. Those are not going to impact us. But at least the government, wanted to continue with the existing taxes without, trying to put any more burden on the existing businesses. So I think that's a good sign, because we do understand the government also struggling at the moment, but at the same time, I mean, the business is also struggling. So we need to find a good balance.
As chairman of Sri Lankan Airlines, I think there are some tax exemptions to the national carrier also, given the troubled times, and how we can look at resurrecting Sri Lankan Airlines. What is your strategy here?
Yeah, so this is something we are really grateful to the government, because this is something that we have requested, because we came up with a 5-year business plan, and withholding, removal of withholding tax was one of the points that we have requested, and I think they have brought that under this budget. And also they have been very supportive to the Sri Lankan airline. I mean, because the government policy is not to privatize, and recently they have approved $500 million of capitalization. Part of that $150 million would come within this year. So I think we are really grateful for the government, but also, I mean, they very well understand that we need the national airlines, because I mean, we have a big role to play in terms of developing the country's economy. I mean, we are not going to keep the airport closed permanently. We have to fly very soon, and we have to be ready for that. So in that context, I think this removal of withholding tax would really help us.
See, actually, as Mr. Article mentioned, You see, there is a lot of space within our economy, which has been now suppressed or dormant because of this COVID situation. But we got to make sure that that space is not neglected. So we got to ensure that Sri Lankan Airlines will be ready to be up and running when times change. We got to ensure that the hotel sector is not broken down and gone into ruin because we have closed down for the time being. So when it opens out finally, at some stage it will open out. At that stage there must be enough of potential for it to again provide the growth. So for that we got to maintain it, and that's why I think some of these decisions have been taken to ensure that these companies remain buoyant and they are not allowed to go down, because they will come in useful at the time when the changes occur.
I think Mr. Sujeewa Rajapakse will have something to add to this also when we talk about taxation, when we talk about simplified tax system, and then more administration here, and the legalization also. But first, do we see a disconnect between the taxpayer, the administration, the corporates?
If you ask me, as a practitioner, yes, there are certain areas where there are certain disconnections. But now I can tell you now through this budget proposal, I think those also have been brought in. Especially we are talking about tax appeals and court, there's going to be a separate court of appeal to resolve these tax appeals, which is important because sometimes we are aware that tax appeals are basically, it takes about 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And if it is say a large concern, I think taxpayers are going to get some kind of benefit because now it goes from so many layers, so many steps. So now I think the proposals have been brought in to say that, okay, if you have a tax appeal and you need to make sure that you deposit that money first and then you go for the appeal. So otherwise, if you take about 5, 6 years, your government is losing revenue. So which is important. In the meantime, there are certain measures taken or rather brought in to make sure that entire system, now there's a remis system, sometime remis system in the department also not really geared up to the greater extent. But now e-filing is going to be mandatory from next year, which is important. So every one of us will have to have a file, every corporate will have to have a tax file, and then we will have to give our identity card number. So whatever the transaction we do will be captured. I think those kind of things are very important. Other than that, you are asking about the question about other areas. Let me also tell you about the health, water, rural development and nutrition. All these things have been well looked after in this budget. And also support has been given for value additions also, because now we have been talking about value addition because of the import substitutions and things like that, which is also important. And youth sector has not been neglected there. So that's another important area, I think, Mr. Minister, that we are aware that youth sector, and there are certain things given, especially for new startups. And there are certain concessions given, and especially new technology. Technological, the advancement also have been looked after. So those are the important things. And utilization of foreign currency loans also have been addressed, Mr. Minister. I heard that Prime Minister was talking about that there are a large amount of the foreign currency loans have been obtained, but not properly utilized, which is important for our country, because we need to make sure that we looked at those things properly.
Actually, I can chip.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
No, just because we were talking about taxes, I think a big reform is to say that next 5 years we will keep these taxes unchanged. That's a big reform, because any investor could plan their investment accordingly. That's a huge reform. And in the Inland Revenue, to add what Sujeewa mentioned, the large taxpayer unit, right? That's another big reform. I think he will know exactly what's happening there. Yes. So those things are here in this budget.
Large taxpayer unit contributes 80% of collections.
Yeah, because certain people think that reforms can't happen without some external
IMF coming or something else coming.
I didn't mention I am external. But these are all homegrown reforms.
As Sujeewa mentioned, you see, we have, since it comes under, to some extent, under my purview, the monitoring of these projects, there are at the moment, Sujeewa, about 289 projects which are more than ₹1 billion each.
God.
and with a total value of around 5 trillion rupees.
5 trillion.
That's $29 billion. Now, what it says is, if we were to ensure that these projects are moving with some speed, and in fact the Prime Minister mentioned that, then you would find that the growth will happen automatically.
Absolutely.
But most of those projects, we have been doing a review, we find those projects are being hemmed in because there is some issue or the other. Maybe there is some place where there has been land acquisition not being done, or some people are protesting, or there has been some money that has to come which has not come in at the right time. So little problems like that, which can be sorted out very quickly. So now we are setting up several units to review all these things, and then once that is regularized, you will find that these projects will start moving fast. There are about 175 of those projects which are funded from external sources. So there is enough capacity for us to grow. It's just that some of those capacity has not been utilized. So as Mr. Attygala very rightly mentioned, if we were to make sure that those are utilized and then this growth occurs, you would find that Sri Lanka will be on the growth path once again. And with that will come the other components coming from the private sector. You would find that we can very easily achieve this 5% or 6% growth next year. Particularly because we have had a low base as well. So we got to be optimistic. We got to work hard. It won't just happen. But if we were to do it properly, we'll definitely have that potential to grow, and that's what we are aiming at.
Indeewari, there are another two important points that I would like to stress here. One is about the plantation sector. Prime Minister is talking about the plantation sector because we know that this country's plantations were basically privatized about 20 odd years ago. And there are certain RPCs, regional plantation companies, which are not really doing well. I think now is the time that government is going to look at those and then look at and see what they are going to do. Other one is banking sector, where I am chairing as a bank.
We'd like to touch on that too, but I think we'll have to take a short commercial break here at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24. Welcome back. You're joining us at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, a special discussion, post-budget discussion, to analyze the benefits and what really Budget 2021 offers. Mr. Sujeewa Rajapakse, before we went into a break, you were trying to talk about the banking sector. Here we talk about mergers, and we're talking about how we can finance segments of society, businesses, and mergers were something that we were talking about in during not the previous government, the government of then President Mahinda Rajapakse, and of course I know Mr. Cabraal was a senior personnel in that government trying to push these policy changes. But again, we're talking about policy consistency, creating an environment where FDIs can be brought into the country, but the role that banks, the state banks especially, will play here. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, before that I would like to say that Honorable Minister now, who are the the Governor of Central Bank, who really went for these mergers and consolidation. In fact, we also, BDO also got involved with, I think we did a fairly good number of mergers, but then what happened then subsequently, the other government didn't want to pursue. But now this, today's budget, now they have, the Honorable Prime Minister has brought in very, very important points. One is about creating a national or other development bank, Honorable Minister, which we have been really looking for. I think they are going to consolidate three.
SMB, HDFC and
RDB, those three are going to be merged, and then creating a development bank, which is important for, especially for SME development. Other one is corporate tax rate reduction has been there, but now today they have brought into the, I think they have legalized it from 28 to 24%. Other one is fiscal consolidation. Another one important factor is now CBS Central Bank, there is a non-bank supervision division, I think, going to be restructured, which is also important at this moment. And there's another one which I am a little not nervous, interested in. Now there are a couple of finance companies, basically the major shareholder is, or rather are banks. I think now it appears that those major or those finance companies are going to merge, absorb into banking banks. So that's another important thing. Apart from that, let me take this, take you through. There's another bold decision taken to charge 1%, you know, the not tax, maybe some 1% surcharge if you are going to bring your hidden locally or internationally kept wealth into Sri Lanka. Of course, you know, the government will charge only 1%. I think that's a very important thing for us to make sure that, okay, to help the country, which is important. Other one is also, I know Honorable Minister is really looking forward promoting the listing or the corporate, you know, the stock market. And there's going to be only 50% tax concession for corporates from 21-22. That's another important thing.
I think that's a very important point for the private sector.
Yeah.
And also, I just want to add to what Sujeewa was talking about, the consolidation.
Right.
As he very rightly said, I can very well remember Honorable Minister during his the governance time, I mean the central bank time, he was really pushing for this consolidation. You know, because we are also, from a business perspective, we also own finance companies, and obviously, right, I think it is very important. I mean, it's a good step. The banks which owns finance companies being absorbed by the bank is I think very good first step. But at the same time also, we need to reduce the number of finance companies, right? It's understandable. I saw somewhere that they are going to be very strict on the finance companies. It is good to be strict on the finance companies, but also they need to handhold them to the next level. So I think, you know, I know that there are many mergers that, you know, where the finance companies are trying to do acquisitions. I really don't know whether the central bank is really interested about this, because we have faced certain difficulties in terms of, you know, getting these mergers done. So I think just like the way that we announce these things, I think authorities and the institutes also must take the correct initiatives to implement these things. I think that is critical. There's no point just announcing fabulous things. I think we all know that, I mean, you know, this is what is needed, the country at this moment, in terms of consolidation of the finance companies and even the banks, because we know that we have too many institutes. I think that's very important that we take that course. But the fact is, whether these institutes are also taking that seriously, I really don't know.
I think Minister Cabraal will have something to talk about, because I remember interviewing you many times as Governor of Central Bank too, back in the day, about these issues.
Actually, that's very true. You know, there was a very clear-cut policy at that time in 2014 that we should reduce the number of institutions that are in finance business, stronger, more liquid companies to be the ones that are in play. So as a result of that, we gave certain incentives for this consolidation to take place. But unfortunately, mergers. But unfortunately, that was not pursued after the last government came in. But now the need for that has been very clearly established. And everyone says, why did we not do it? But now we need to do it even at this late stage. So I think Prime Minister's announcement that the government would be providing with the tax incentive as well in order to make these investments in these new companies is a wonderful way forward, because that would mean that the financial system stability would be ensured. And financial system stability is important for a country to move forward. And also there must be some very large-scale companies as well, finance companies as well as banks. So that's going to be achieved, and hopefully, as Ashok quite rightly mentioned, there would be the change of ideas to make sure that these work. And now after the announcement by the Prime Minister, I'm sure the Central Bank also will take the steps to move that forward. And I'm actually very pleased that that is being done, because I think that's the right way to go, and we would achieve a lot by doing that as well.
I think Mr. Attygala, Treasury Secretary, you would have something to add to this also. We talk about SMEs also, financing the SMEs. How are we looking at Budget 2021 in the new year? How are we looking at supporting our new
Before
industries?
answering that, he mentioned about the implementation part, right? From the Treasury side, the necessary legal framework for these tax amendments most of them, certain things like VAT reduction, taking out NBT, those things have already happened. They have passed that in the parliament. So certain things we are targeting before the next tax year starts, that is April, to complete all those. So the legal framework should be there for everything, these laws or the taxes to be in a way operated. The other one, the SME sector, because if you take our country, 60 to 70%, I think, that's my feeling, is SME. So anything given in this, right, all the activities he mentioned about this garage, right, then startups, again vocational training startups, all are SMEs, and we have reduced the taxes on SMEs, especially the VAT. It was 1 million per month, the turnover. Now it's 25 million, that's 300 million per annum, right? So it's pure SME, 25 million is nothing, right? So clearly government is thinking, because it's the SME is the key for this whole story. Right? That's the base. So that we have supported that.
I think we have only 5 minutes on the show. If we can break this down a little for the common man, for the general public, one may wonder what they really got out of this budget, because there's tradition in Sri Lanka where everyone gathers around your television trying to understand what they would have from a particular budget, whether the state sector, like I said, whether the small industries, to the private sector, but it doesn't seem like these particular industries have been given salary hikes or certain targeted benefits or relief measures.
I'll touch on that very quickly, Indeewari. Now, people are used to benefits as being some kind of a handout. Lots of times people think of benefits as when the gas price is reduced by 10 rupees, that's called a benefit. But when you give 100,000 jobs to people, the people who did not have jobs, people who are at the lowest end, where they were on Samurdhi benefits, and they are being provided with one job per family. Look what a huge benefit that is. During the time of the election, I used to go around and then talk to people, and nobody came and said, please reduce the price of dal by 10 rupees. But they came and said, give my son a job.
Yes.
Now that's where the real benefit is. So this government has reacted by providing jobs for those children, these kids of our country, then provided jobs for the graduates who have not been having a job for the last so many years, provided the startups with incentives, as Mr. Attygala mentioned, provided with new loans for those people who are going to be involved in vocational training institutions. So these are all massive benefits. And when you give water to a family, that does not have water, just imagine what a huge benefit that is.
Building a road that's a common man, because about 5,000 bridges, small bridges. It's called Valpala, right? So those are for the common people. Right? The whole infrastructure investment. No?
Absolutely.
And those also will create jobs.
That will create
jobs. That's
and that will also encourage them to do certain jobs.
Because they can bring their product to the market. The connectivity happens.
To add to that also, we're talking about an expansion of the retirement age by amending the Employees Provident Fund Act. How do you look at this?
Well, I think it's a good thing, because I mean, in today's context, we have a very healthy people, right? People live longer. So in that context, retiring people at 55 years, I think it's a problem for, because they don't have a job after that.
It's actually a problem for society also.
Correct. It's a problem for the society. And, so in that context, I think it is a fantastic thing. But also at the same time, from the private sector, we also may have to bring labor reforms, because, I mean, what we find sometimes, we want to have productive people working for us for 60 years or even beyond that.
Right.
But, to remove people, unproductive people, it's a very difficult thing. So I think labor reforms also has to come along with this to help, the private sector, because otherwise that we don't want to carry employees who are unproductive for further 5 years. I think that's not going to help the economy. So I think that is also part of, that also has to be looked into.
I think Mr. Rajapakse will have something to add. We have a few minutes on the show yes. We talk about benefits industry-wise, why we haven't given individual handouts, why we haven't spoken about basic relief, but a holistic approach again. Closing remarks to you.
Yeah, just to say, now you need to look at, now Ashok was talking about this productivity and things like that, which is very, very important. Now we need to ask ourselves as employees whether we do the right thing. Now these days, most of us are basically locked down at home. But end of the month, you expect your salary. But you need to understand that every one of us at least save about 25–30% of our salaries, because we don't have much, we don't go into market, we don't go shopping and all that, so you save. But still these employees, kind of, it's not a demand, but still they expect. From the other side, banking side, we have reduced the interest rates, brought it down to a single digit.
Provide moratoriums,
many more things. But we need to look at and see the cost of production has been brought down, or whether the cost of service brought down. But I am yet to see. When I go to market only, I see still, there is an issue about the cost of living, brought down. That is not happening. So on the other hand, other than quantitative aspects in the budget, I also have seen qualitative aspects. Now here he is talking about foreign missions. Now there are enough foreign missions who are not really promoting the economic diplomacy, which is important, because they are there for to promote the country and the country's economy. And those are not been happening. I think now he is going to focus on that also, which is important. And those are things that I would like to speak out. I think overall, as professionals, businessmen, I am happy. As my learned friend said, that look, implementation is important. The concessions are not there always. You can't expect to give concessions every time. But wherever possible, those things have been given. And consistency of policies are absolutely important. That's welcoming. I think that's what I can tell you.
We've spoken of Robin Hood budgets. We've spoken about Christmas relief budgets. We spoke about many of that in history. But finally, what would you say here?
I would say this is a realistic budget. See, it has looked at the challenges, and there are quite a few challenges that are facing our country today. We need to get our debt into shape. We need to get our growth back on track. So there are some really major challenges, but at the same time, we also got to overcome COVID and the debacle there. So I think it's an important thing for us to realize that we'll also have to put our best foot forward and work on that. It won't just happen. We all will need to put some real effort and make sure that it works. So I think the first step in providing ourselves with a basic framework, which is exciting, is there. But the next step is for us to make it happen.
Right. I think thank you very much, Minister, for your time. That's all the time we have on the show. We had with us State Minister of Money and Capital Market and State Enterprise Reforms, Mr. Ajith Nivard Cabraal, Treasury Secretary S.R. Attygala, Mr. Ashok Pathirage, Chairman Softlogic Group and Chairman Sri Lankan Airlines, Sujeewa Rajapakse, Chairman People's Bank and Managing Partner of BDO Sri Lanka, joining us today on this Hyde Park special, Roadmap to Prosperity, Budget 2021 Decoded in association with BDO Partners, live here at Ada Derana 24. Thank you for watching. Good night.
Roadmap to Prosperity, Budget 2021. Welcome to our technical analysis on the special segment on Budget 2021 highlights. Prime Minister Honorable Mahinda Rajapakse, in his capacity as Finance Minister, unveiled the 75th budget of independent Sri Lanka this afternoon. The budget, which was presented under the policy framework, Vistas of Prosperity, has mapped its road ensuring a prosperous 2021 for Sri Lanka. Despite the macroeconomic and global challenges faced in 2019 and 2020 and its continuous resultant consequences that are expected to pave its way towards the years to come, the 2021 still stands as a promising one. The Minister on the outset stressed and ensured that a free and improved health service to combat COVID-19 and non-communicable disease stands as a key priority. Other notably prioritable sections were education, sports, youth, and of course, national production. While emphasis was made towards Sri Lanka's geopolitical importance, the budget aims to maintain a 6% growth rate, limiting the inflation to 5% and budget deficit at 4%. Further, the national debt is expected to be reduced to 70% from 90%. There were various tax simplification methods that were proposed in the budget as well as in proposals during the year. The budget makes a firm commitment to continue tax simplification initiated in December 2019 to ease tax policy stability while strengthening administration. As such, the standard VAT rate of 8%, other than on VAT on financial services, which was introduced on the 1st of December 2019, will be continued together with the threshold increase of 25 million per month. This was administratively effective from the 1st of January 2020. To ensure policy stability and ease of doing business, the tax proposals which were introduced in January this year will remain unchanged for the next 5 years. The changes that were includes, of course, various exemptions, tax concessions, and certain removal of taxes, such as the exemptions include the foreign currency interest income, foreign sourced interest income, foreign service income, foreign sourced income, information technology, interest on Sri Lanka development bonds, lab services by non-residents, as well as removal of withholding taxes on interest, dividends, specified fees, employment income, partnership profits, royalties, and other payments made locally. The introduction of APIT, which is the Advanced Personal Tax, was also policy pronounced in the budget. The exemptions on VAT on condominiums as well as IT and enabling services were also reiterated in the budget speech. Now, these changes were administratively enforced from the 1st of January 2020 and have been repronounced in the budget. The tax exemption proposed on farming, agriculture, fisheries, and livestock industries will continue for the next 5 years. This exemption was introduced administratively from the year of assessment 2019-20, and the proclamation ensures policy stability for the agro-farming industry. An exemption on dividends for foreign companies was introduced in January 2020. The budget seeks to extend this exemption for 3 years if the money is invested in Sri Lankan sovereign bonds or in the stock market. This would encourage investment activity by non-residents and would bring in the much-needed foreign currency into the country. There were also plenty of proposals on strengthening tax administration. All companies are mandated to have tax files from the 1st of April 2021 onwards. Individuals will be granted a mechanism of paying taxes using their national identity card numbers. The budget also seeks to establish an online system to ease the collection of taxes, as well as introducing a legal framework for collection of taxes and to expedite disputes, which means that they would be setting up an independent appeal court for tax disputes, and the time frame for hearing cases would be speeding up. On strengthening tax administration, the budget also proposes to introduce laws against auditors and private tax consultants who aid and abet to prepare false records. There were also several revenue proposals and concessions that were granted. And the significance of this is that the tax revenue increase expected is 27% increase from the 2020 estimate. The key revenue proposal in this budget was the introduction of a special goods and services tax on alcohol, cigarettes, telecommunication, vehicles, and betting and gaming. These sectors currently contribute towards 50% of the tax revenue, and this measure seeks to be one composite tax to simplify administration. There was also a very interesting proposal for companies that want to go onto the stock market. This was also granted under the previous income tax law, and to incentivize listing, a concession of half of the income tax rate will be granted to local companies who list on the Colombo Stock Exchange prior to 31st December 2021. Thereafter, a concessionary rate of 14% will be granted for 3 years. A 5-year grace period for taxes levied on vocational training centers has been introduced with a view to help double the annual intake of students. To assist the immediate need of the deeply affected tourism industry, measures have been proposed to minimize taxes levied by local government bodies from tourism-related business. Another key concession to ensure stability was the introduction of a 7-year tax holiday for renewable energy projects. This shows that the government is very keen on sustainability, and renewable energy is the way to go. On multinationals, we all know that there's a lot of encouragement towards exports, and this budget is no different. So multinationals who are currently engaged in import trading are encouraged to focus on export and will be granted tax concessions on the dividends paid by them. Additionally, there were also concessions that will be granted on the interest income on the deposits, which will also be tax-free. As a means to facilitate post-COVID-19 economic recovery, income from sale of PPE and similar products by BOI companies will be considered as deemed exports and be eligible for reduced tax rates and VAT exemptions. VAT exemption has also been proposed on medical equipment and machinery which were imported and supplied or donated during the pandemic period between 20th May 2020 and 31st December 2020. On personal taxation, the personal tax relief, which was increased on the 1st of January 2020, was also repronounced in the budget. The payments for the qualifying payments were granted as up to 100,000 per month, which would be 1.2 million per year for resident individuals, which would include payment deductions for education, health, payment on housing loans, contributions to an approved pension scheme, and expenditure for the purchase of equity and security. Additionally, there were various income tax changes that were granted for both personal as well as corporates. The personal slabs have been revised to 3 million slabs of 6, 12 and 18 respectively, and terminal benefits have also been changed to complement these, where the terminal benefit will be exempted for the first 10 million and the balance would go at 6% and 12% respectively. The withholding taxes were removed drastically, and the only withholding tax that remains would be on interest payments made to resident, non-resident citizens of Sri Lanka, which would be at 5%, and of course payment made to non-residents. The corporate income tax rates would be 14% on exports, tourism, agro-processing, Medicare, and construction. Manufacturing would go at 18%. The trading, banking and finance and other sectors not covered under the above sectors would go at 24%, whereas the liquor, gaming and tobacco industry would be taxed at 40%. These changes have been repronounced, and there have been also a repronouncement of certain COVID-19 tax relief measures that were previously pronounced in the cabinet by the Cabinet of Ministers, such as waiver of income taxes in arrears, payments on delayed payments not have penalties, and of course delays on returns to be facilitated, as duly filed. So with all of these and with more to come, I'm sure that Sri Lanka is on the road to prosperity, and we could all ensure that we have a prosperous future. Thank you.